So we'll start with our motivation. Is this amplifying okay? You can hear? Okay, so we exist within this world filled with other living beings, all of whom are thinking I, me, my, and mine, just like we're thinking I, me, my, and mine. And by reifying this I and then inflating its importance, we create a lot of misery for ourselves as well as for others. And it's really rather shocking when you step back and look at it, how everybody wants happiness. Nobody wants suffering. That's, something we all share in common. And yet, with our thoughts and our emotions and acting out these thoughts and emotions, we create misery for ourselves and we create misery for each other. And you'd think, because we all want happiness and not suffering, that we would not do this. But because we don't know correctly what are the causes of happiness, what are the causes of suffering, because we can't discriminate what is a constructive emotion and what is a destructive one, then we wind up creating so many problems. And we wonder why we're so unhappy. So even when we hear the Buddha's teachings and one part of our mind says, yes, this really makes a lot of sense, another part of our mind says, oh, it's too hard. And because we would really like to have happiness without making much effort. So one of the first things we have to overcome on the path is this kind of laziness, this sense of entitlement that I should have happiness without creating effort, without creating the causes, without exerting effort. And to really see that that thought is in fact a huge impediment for us, because it prevents us from creating the causes for happiness. So what we want to do is instead replace it with a thought of joyous effort that is energetic and looks forward to creating virtue. A mind that rejoices in virtue, our own and others' virtue. A mind that wants to dedicate all of that virtue, all of that merit, for the supreme awakening of each and every sentient being. So that's the kind of mind we want to have in our day and also as we listen to teachings. So let's generate that. So it's interesting, isn't it? How yeah, we all just feel like sometimes we look at the path as if it's something, it's like a syllabus that the Buddha created, you know, and you have to do this, and you have to do this, and you have to do this and this. And it's like, Buddha, could you shorten the syllabus? Could you make it easier? You know, this is really too long. There's too much expected of me. You know, can you have a remedial class with lower requirements? Yeah. And of course, you know, the Buddha did not create the path. He can't change it. He just described, you know, kind of what is our present state and what we have to do to go about changing it and what the results are going to be. So the basis, path, and fruit. And then it's our choice whether to practice it or not. Yeah? And if we say, well, you know, it's just too hard, then don't complain to the Buddha, you know, because it's our choice that is saying that. Yeah? So rather than make that kind of choice and then, you know, feel like it's all unfair, better to just have the attitude of no matter how long it takes, I'm going to do this because it's something good, you know. And don't keep looking at the clock, and don't keep looking at your effort monitor. Yeah. Oh, I exerted X amount of effort today. You know, I should be getting somewhere. But just, you know, practice the path with a happy mind. Yeah, you might as well be happy. I mean, you can be unhappy if you want to. But since the path is what it is, and we got to practice it, we might as well do it with a happy mind. Yeah. Kind of like, you know, cleaning the bathroom. You got to do it, so you might as well be happy about it. Yeah. Although it's a free world, you can choose to be miserable if you want to. And sometimes we do. Okay. Shoot ourselves in the foot. Okay, so we were, the Thursday night class is, this time is about Nagarjuna's text, Precious Garland, which is a teaching that he gave to one monarch who was his friend and also benefactor. And in the chapter we're on now, I mean, in the earlier chapters, he talked about how you create the cause for upper rebirth, how you create the cause for the highest good, for liberation and full awakening. And now he's talking about royal policy, how to govern correctly. You know, so you know, in terms of the king, the path isn't just about going into some kind of state of deep meditation all the time. It's how he lives his life, and since he has the karma to be in that role of, you know, being the leader of a kingdom, how he can do that and integrate the Dharma into his, you know, his duties as a king. Yeah, so this is very telling that we happen to be at this section as the election, you know, is approaching. The never-ending election that will, I think, I'll be very happy when it's finally over with. Although I don't think it'll ever be over with. Anyway, okay, so the part we just covered, he was talking about, you know, the importance of setting up monasteries, educational centers, and having a well-educated populace, having a populace who has faith in the Dharma and practices the Dharma. Nagarjuna also gave instructions for how to choose ministers, choose your military generals, your treasurers, your various officials, so very practical stuff, but how to do this all according to the Dharma. Okay? And so, just to review a little bit, in verse 327, he says, if you rule for the sake of Dharma and not for fame or out of desire, then it will have a most meaningful result. Otherwise, your rule will be disastrous. So here he's talking to the king, but it applies to us whenever we're in a leadership position, whether it's in a family or a project at work or school or a club or whatever you're doing, okay? So if we do it for the sake of the Dharma, for the betterment of sentient beings, and not for fame, not to receive praise and approval, not out of desire to receive offerings and respect, then we'll have a very meaningful result from doing whatever we do. But if our motivation is corrupt, we may do the same actions, but because the motivation is corrupt, the result is going to be very different. And, it will not be happy in this life or in future lives. Okay? And then in 328 he says, King, hear how in this world, where the one usually destroys the other, meaning worldly life destroys your Dharma practice, or Dharma practice destroys, what you're doing in the world, you can still have both, the Dharma and a kingdom. Okay, so, this is actually very related to Dharma in the West, where people want samsara and nirvana at the same time. We want kind of our worldly pleasure. Yeah, we want wealth, we want a good life, we want pleasure, and we also want the Dharma. Okay, so here he's talking about how to do it, so the first thing was have a good motivation in everything you do. And, and then the king is saying, it's hard to do this because when I look around, all the other kings are fighting and bullying each other and bossing each other around and lying and exploiting their populace and being dishonest. Nothing's changed, has it? And, so how do I do this? And, that's by having a good motivation as best as you can, and you keeping your Dharma principles, not giving them up in order to please somebody else or gain popularity. And then the king says, well, what about people who are really dishonest and who create crimes and who hurt other people? What do I do with them? Because if the usual thing is for law and order is you arrest as many people as possible, you punish them severely, and that is somehow supposed to make them want to do what you want them to do. Okay? So it's like, I'm going to beat you up so much until you decide to do things my way. Since when does that work as a strategy? Okay, it doesn't. People don't respond very well to hate and anger and, being beaten up. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's why in many ways our response to terrorism fuels what ISIS is doing. Yeah. Okay, so here the king says, Nagarjuna says, you can't just let people do bad actions and harm each other because that harms the law-abiding people who, aren't harming anybody. And it also if you let people just do whatever, they also create a lot of negative karma, which sends them to the lower realms in the future. So with a mind that wants to protect your law-abiding citizens from harm, and a mind that wants to protect the people who are doing harmful actions from lower rebirths, with that kind of mind with compassion for both the perpetrator and the victim, then you arrest people and take them into custody. And you may have to punish them or fine them, imprison them or beat them. But you do it with an attitude that wants to be of long-term benefit to them, not an attitude of venting your own anger or humiliating and trashing these people, or inflicting misery, thinking that that is justice. Yeah. So this is not at all an eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth kind of thing. It's you're trying to protect people from themselves in some ways, okay? So then Nagarjuna says, because the king's trying to figure out how to get all these different officials and people together so he can run the kingdom properly. And Nagarjuna says to him, may you always be accompanied by many advisors who are mature in knowledge of good family, well-versed in public policy, afraid of misdeeds, not contentious, and able to see what should be done. Okay? So this is the job description for the people who work in the government. Yeah? This is what they should do. Yeah? Because if they don't have these kind of qualities, then it's likely that they will not treat the populace fairly. They will punish innocent people. They will give their friends a long rope. And if you don't treat people fairly, then of course the populace is going to get fed up and you're going to have a crisis on your hands. Okay? So here are the qualities, and so we should think when we're in leadership positions, how to look for these qualities in other people. We should also, as we hear this list, think of how we can develop these same qualities so that we can be somebody who supports a good leader. Yeah? Because a good leader can only do things according to how much the followers are well disciplined and supportive and cooperative. Yeah? So that's quite important. So it's not that we should always say, I want to be a leader. Yeah, but how can I be a good follower? Because as a good follower, you really can make things happen, because no leader can control anything, or control everything. It always depends on other people. Okay, so good qualities, somebody who's mature in knowledge. Yeah, so somebody who knows something, and not just that they have book knowledge, but they have learned through life experience. Yeah, that's quite important. Book knowledge doesn't always cut it. Book knowledge can give you how to do things, in a technical way, but it doesn't give you the finesse, for lack of a better word, or judgment to be able to see the nuances in different situations and to see how to handle different situations in different ways. So in one way, you want, people who are mature in knowledge, because you don't want hot-headed people who are stubborn, who want to just change everything, but they don't really know what they're changing it into, and they haven't had a lot of life experience about it. Okay, so you don't want to just let's throw everything to the wind and change everything all at once. But you also don't want people who are so mature that they're stuck in their ways and they can't imagine doing anything differently. Okay? So you need some kind of bureaucracy. You don't want people who are stuck in their ways that just add more and more to the bureaucracy and make it heavier and more ineffective. And you don't want people who want to come in and change everything by next week because they don't have the experience to really know what's going on. Okay, so somewhere in between, yeah? They're mature in knowledge, they're of good family. Yeah, that doesn't mean they have to be high class, but it means that they, their parents taught them to be honest, their parents taught them to be polite. They aren't just people who are, saying and doing whatever they want, okay? They're well-versed in public policy. If you give somebody a job, they have to know something about the job they're doing, yeah? So you want people, if you're giving them policy jobs, they have to have experience, This is quite evident in the present election, isn't it? When one of the candidates has zero experience in policy and zero experience in, how the world runs outside of the business world. Okay, somebody who's afraid of misdeeds. In other words, somebody who appreciates virtue, who doesn't want to create negative karma, who's going to do their best to be honest and reliable. Okay? Someone who's not contentious. So they're not always, I don't like this and I don't like that, and can we do it this way and let's do it that way, and you made this mistake and you made that mistake, and why can't you people do this and why can't you do that? People who are just uncooperative, always complaining about others. Us. Okay. And people who are able to see what should be done. In other words, people who aren't so cluttered with either their own emotions or their own opinions that they can't look at a situation freshly and see what needs to be done in the situation. Because when our mind is cluttered, I feel this, I feel that, and with emotions or with opinions, let's do it this way and how about that way, and then we can't see anything fresh. Yeah, we're just we're quite limited. Okay, so basically what Nagarjuna is telling the king here is to gather people of unusual qualities and give them the positions and empower them to act. But before you empower them to act, make sure they have the qualities that are necessary so that they act in a good way. Okay? So people who are educated, they understand politics, they know what good policy is, they know something about the customs of the world. If you have somebody who is an ambassador, they're sensitive to the cultures of the other people that they're dealing with. They don't just kind of barge in and say, you've got to do things like our culture. Okay? So pick those kind of administrators. Then the next section is about dealing compassionately with wrongdoers. So here's the prison policy, that the police policy, the what's the word for it? The law enforcement policy, okay, that Nagarjuna gives. So even if they rightly fine, imprison, or corporally punish wrongdoers, you, being always moistened by compassion, should show kindness. Okay, so as long as the administrators have those qualities, they act fairly, then they may incarcerate people or beat them or scold them. I was talking last time about how beating was socially acceptable, in these cultures. I mean, still even now, I mean, in Singapore, you get beaten, you get caned if you do certain things. Yeah. In the U.S., supposedly that doesn't happen, but it does happen. Yeah. Too much. So, these people may, be punished in some way, and the administrators are the ones who should, with fairness, assign those different punishments. The king should not be the one who does it. Yeah, it should be the administrator or a judge, or in our culture, a judge or a jury that does that. And the king should be the one who looks at people with compassion and sees, if they've changed, and if they've changed, to grant them clemency. So it's quite interesting because, you see that in some ways in the way our law enforcement system is set up, because governors, presidents have the power of clemency. Yeah? The idea being, that other people give the sentences, and then these people, the governors or the president, can look and see, have the people changed? Do they really still need that kind of harsh sentence? Or can the sentence be reduced? And then that person has the power to do it. So yesterday, Obama granted clemency to 214 federal prisoners, most of whom were nonviolent drug offenders, because of the 3 strikes law, got, horrible punishments that far outweighed the crime they did, okay? So, the ruler has this kind of power to do that. So he's saying to the king, you should listen to, if somebody's defending an inmate and saying that they've changed, they won't repeat the action, you should listen with an open mind and then free that person if you can, or lighten the punishment if you can. Yeah. So it's interesting. I was, let me see. Okay, I'll tell this. Let me do the next verse and then I'll say this. Okay, so 331. King, out of compassion, you should always make your mind focused upon benefiting all beings, even those who have committed the most serious misdeeds. Okay, so some people do horrible actions. From the Buddhist viewpoint, the 5 heinous actions are the most horrible ones: killing your mother, killing your father, killing an arhat, causing schism in the Sangha, and wounding a Buddha so that blood flows. And so even people who have done those kind of actions should be looked at with compassion. And, if they have to be imprisoned, imprison them, but always see that everybody is redeemable. Okay? It's interesting how the 5 heinous actions, they don't really totally map onto what our culture thinks are the most heinous actions. I mean, killing definitely. It doesn't matter mother, father, or an arhat in our culture. In our culture, it's more how you killed. Yeah, that becomes something very heavy. Drawing blood from a Buddha, causing schism in the Sangha, in our culture, no problem. The law's not going to punish you. So it might be something very negative. Or, even in many states, if one of your parents asks you to assist in their suicide, from a Buddhist viewpoint, it's very negative. From a legal perspective, at least in Washington State and a few other states, there's no punishment involved. Okay? So while there is some correlation between the Buddhist view of non-virtue, it doesn't map totally with what's legal and illegal in our country. Okay, but the point is, as the king, you should not just ascribe a label to somebody because of one action they did in their life and then say, that person's horrible, they're irredeemable, throw them away, keep them in prison for their life, plus more. Yeah. And so you get, the one man that I write to, he has a life sentence plus 100 years. Is that really necessary? Yeah. So, okay. So what is quite interesting is Nagarjuna is really saying that the king should be compassionate, and if he sees that people have been rehabilitated, he should release them from prison. He should not just want to confine people and retaliate and punish them for the sake of doing that. And I was thinking about it, because in olden times, if you had a king, the king was not an elected official. You could not get rid of them except by, of course, having a revolution, but that's a bit difficult. Okay? So you were stuck with the king. So it's good if the king shows compassion, because then the people in the kingdom will not want to revolt and not, act up and so on, because they trust the king. Yeah. In our elected democracy, it's a different situation, and we want the people who are judges and governors and presidents to be tough on crime and to give heavy punishments and to keep people locked up for a long time and not to grant clemency. Yeah, at least this is the mood of the country, the country's been in since when, the 90s? Something like that. Just this law and order, lock them up, put them away, throw away the key, and that's it. Yeah. So it's interesting how with a democracy, when you're electing people, at least now, the populace wants as much punishment as possible, because they're looking at it as the government is punishing the wrongdoers who are other than us. Yeah. Whereas in a kingdom, if you have a king who misuses their power, that king punishes people who are us. Yeah, in a dictatorship, there's no guarantee that, there's no rule of law. You can get arrested and punished without having done anything. So in those kind of situations, it's even more important that the people in government are compassionate. Yeah, because they have that kind of power, and if they misuse it, there's going to be a lot of turmoil. These are just some of my thoughts. Are you getting what I'm saying a little bit? Yeah? It's very curious how, in our culture, this thing of, the evildoers are not us. They're other people. Yeah? And one of our candidates, points out in great detail all the other people who are criminals and rapists, and let's lock them up before they even do anything, or let's not even let them in the country, or let's deport them, or whatever. Okay? And that's very fear-based, isn't it? And no compassion at all. And it's based on The populace goes along with it as long as the people who are getting arrested are other. Yeah. If the people who are getting arrested and punished starts being you, yeah, like you had, let's say, under Stalin or under Mao, yeah, then it's a whole different thing, yeah. Then the people become quite afraid. In those two instances, the people didn't revolt, but you can easily see how people eventually would revolt if that kind of legal system was forced on them. Well, I mean, look at the French Revolution. That's a good example. The people did revolt. Okay. Anyway, these are just some of my random thoughts about government. For whatever it's worth, probably nothing. But, I just find it interesting, how Nagarjuna is giving one advice to the king and how our citizenry in the free world is giving another message to our rulers, the people that we elect. Yeah, because, parole boards in our country, incredibly, are so difficult to get parole. Even you coming up for parole, even you have many, many letters from people who know you, who have stated how you're changed. They don't want to give parole. They don't give parole very easily, And clemency is even harder to get. Yeah, which is really, rather, it's nice that Obama did that, but they were all low-level crimes. Yeah, clemency when you work in the system with people who are on death row, granting clemency is like extremely difficult. Yeah. And what makes it difficult is not just the minds of the governors, but the law and the minds of the populace, because if you give clemency, people don't like it. And so you have this thing with Tim McCain, Hillary's running mate, who is against the death penalty, and yet he only granted clemency, I think, once in all his years as governor of Virginia, because Virginia law was such that he had to abide by the law and could only grant clemency in certain situations. And it really tore at him, because he didn't like the legal, he didn't agree with capital punishment. Yeah, it's difficult if you're elected to a job and you don't like the requirements for doing the job. And if the people who elected you are going to scream if you act according to your own moral conscience. Difficult. Okay, so 332. You should particularly have compassion for those who have committed the serious negativity of murder. These ones who have ruined themselves are indeed worthy of great person's compassion. Okay? In our world, those who have committed the serious negativity of murder are usually the ones who the populace has the least compassion for. Yeah. And here he is saying you should have the most compassion for those people. Why? Because they ruined themselves and they ruined others. So how did they ruin themselves? Well, first of all, you wind up in prison with a long prison sentence, so you ruin yourself in that way. Second of all, you have to live with the knowledge that you killed somebody, and that's not easy knowledge to live with. Some of the guys I correspond with who have murdered people, tell me, that they remember exactly, clearly, the face of the person they murdered, right, at the time that they did that, and they have to live with that their whole lives. So their whole life, this life is ruined, and future life is also ruined because it's such a great negativity to kill other living beings. And unless they do really strong purification, they'll wind up in the lower realms in the next life. So Nagarjuna is saying, especially have compassion for people in this kind of situation. Yeah. Yeah, one of the things I have on my desk to do these days, during our course, is one of the men that I write to when he was a juvenile, when he was 17. He committed a murder together with two of his friends. It was a perverted murder based on devil worship and all these kind of wrong deeds that, how teenagers get into all kind of weird ways of thinking. Well, he was in that weird way of thinking with some of his friends, and they wound up killing another friend of theirs. So he was 17 at the time. He is, I think, about 43, 45 now. Yeah, been in prison more than half of his life. And since the Supreme Court has, the decisions in recent years has said that you can't give life without parole to juveniles, and that they have to retroactively apply that, then he is going to come up for parole, hopefully sometime soon. The government in his state will probably say you have to be in prison for 25 years before you can have parole, but he's done that. So, right. Yeah, he might be closer to 50, actually. Anyway, he's done his 25 years. And so he's coming up for parole. And they asked me to write a letter because I know him. I've known him since we met in, I think, '02. Yeah. And he's really changed a lot from that 17-year-old who was very confused. And he's now doing a lot of really good things within the prison system. So much so that the DOC, the Department of Corrections, changed him from one prison to another so he could work on videos and things like that for their department, because he has a skill and he works well and he's cooperative. So, so there's the chance for him to have parole, technically. Whether the system will actually do it, or whether the people will say, what you did when you were 17 is inexcusable and there's no parole, we don't know. Yeah. Yeah. There's another man I write to who murdered somebody when he was 19. He's in his 60s now. Yeah. Every time he comes up, they have him come up for parole, but every time the parole board says, the crime you committed is so disgusting, we can't give you parole. And yet they keep tempting him by bringing him up for parole every few years, and every time saying the same thing. Although, he's 60-something, there's no way he's going to be a danger to society right now. Yeah. And I actually look at the situation, and it's so weird, because if they release him, he has no family, no money, nowhere to go. He wants his freedom, but what's he going to do if he's released? you know? Actually, in terms of security, he's going to be more secure in prison because he has, clothes and food and shelter. Yeah? So it's weird, because he wants to get out. And yet if he gets out, I don't know what in the world he's going to do. Yeah? They don't make provisions for you. Yeah?
The world has changed so much. Oh my gosh, you would go to the store, go to the bank, or put gas in a car, looking at anything.
Right. And how do you get a job after you've been imprisoned for, 45 years or something? Yeah. Something's very screwy, isn't it? Yeah. I mean, that's why I'm very glad that there's a lot of discussion now about prison reform and law enforcement reform. It's really quite needed. Okay. Okay, so here, again, he's saying have most compassion for the person who's done the most horrible negativity. Yeah. And Aryadeva in the 400 said that if a mother has many children, she feels more compassion for the child who is less intelligent or less able than the other ones, because she figures that the more intelligent ones, the more able ones can make it on their own. She has more compassion for the ones that are going to face more trouble. So it's the similar idea here. People who have harmed others have a lot on their back that they're carrying around, and so they need a lot of compassion. Okay, 333. Either every day or every 5 days, release the weakest prisoners and see that it is not the case that the remaining ones are never released as is appropriate. Okay? So every few days, the king should observe the inmates, should review their records. If somebody is very physically weak, if they're feeble, let them out. They're not going to hurt anybody. Let them be with their family before they die. Okay? And even though some remaining prisoners may be very strong and healthy, don't use that as a reason never to let them out, because if they have reformed, if they have changed, then they deserve to be liberated. They're no longer, a threat to society. Okay? And then he's also saying, even if they haven't changed yet, don't look at anybody as unrehabilitatable. Okay? So don't look at any inmate as, I'm with the thought of I'm never going to let this one out. Yeah. And it's quite interesting. Let me read the next verse, and then I'll talk more about it. Mm-hmm. The next verse says, from thinking that some should never be released, you develop behaviors and attitudes that contradict your precepts. From contradicting your precepts, you continually accumulate more negativity. So he's saying to the king, if you think some person is so evil inherently that they should never be released because they can never improve, then you are contradicting your precepts. And by contradicting your bodhisattva precepts, you are accumulating more negativity yourself. Okay? And then even actually he's doing this not necessarily even in terms of the bodhisattva precepts, okay, but in terms of just, the 5 precepts that the king has as a layperson. Because when, he explains, when you make a very strong determination, kind of like a vow that is involved in some kind of negativity. You know, like a butcher just says, I'm going to kill my whole life. That's how I'm going to earn my living, yeah? Or in this case, if the king says, you know, I'm going to punish these people and never let them out because they're so evil and they need to suffer for what they did. That strong determination, it's called an anti-vow, okay? Or sometimes they translate it as non-vow, but it doesn't mean non-vow. It doesn't mean anti-vow like the opposite of a vow. What it means is a non-virtuous vow. It's an anti-virtue vow. Yeah, that's the best way to describe it. Because the butcher is making a strong determination to kill. The king is making a strong determination to punish. Yeah. So when you have that anti-vow in your mind stream, then your regular precepts, your regular ethical restraints are inhibited from functioning, and you don't accumulate all that good karma you could normally accumulate from them. And in fact, you accumulate so much more negative karma from having this anti-vow, because it's there all the time in your mind, even if you're not actually doing the action. Just in the same way with our ethical restraints, if you're not killing or stealing or whatever right now, you're constantly accumulating virtue. Okay? So he's really warning against having this kind of strong negative intention in the mind. Saying that, king, be careful yourself. It's not just that you're causing somebody else unnecessary suffering, but you're also harming yourself by gaining this anti-vow. So 333, until they are released, those prisoners should be made content by providing them with barbers, baths, food, drink, clothing, and medical care. As if you have the intention of making unruly children behave properly, you should discipline them out of compassion, not out of anger or the desire for material gain. Okay, so until you release these people from prison, yeah, you shouldn't make them so miserable that it's unbearable. And some prisons, in some countries, and maybe even in our country too, people live in filth. They live in horrible living circumstances. Yeah. Some countries in the world, if they throw you in prison, it's horrible. It's miserable. Yeah. In this country, they may not physically, legally beat you, but the guards will beat you or beat you up or arrange for other prisoners to beat you up. This happens a lot where the guards or the prison officials, they will put people from different gangs together in the same cell, yeah, to foment trouble so that they will harm each other. Yeah, they will let people who don't get along go out on the yard together for, exercise time, knowing that they will get in fights. And then, of course, they have the gunmen on the periphery of the prison who will shoot them. Yeah. I got a letter just a month or two ago from one guy I correspond with, and he was sick, so he was in the county jail because he had to go to the doctor. They took him from prison to the county jail. And they put in his cell one man who was mentally ill. So the man who was mentally ill was hallucinating and beat him up. And the guards, it took them a while to kind of get there and break it up and so on and so forth. Because sometimes in the prison system, when, if the guards or the officials have this negative intention, they they, in some perverted way, get some pleasure out of seeing people harm each other, figuring that they're all so disgusting, might as well let them get rid of each other, something like that. Yeah. And in the states like California, where the prisons are filled with gang members, yeah, I mean, it's quite dangerous, very, very dangerous for people. Okay, so don't run a prison like that, okay? Keep them safe, make them content. Provide them with barbers, because in ancient India we figured out that barbers doubled as dentists. Yeah, so give them proper medical and dental care. Okay, let them have baths, feed them, give them something to drink. I heard from one guy in Texas when his prison was put on lockdown when they had like the heat that was over 100. When you're on lockdown, nobody can leave their cell at all. And they were all in their cells, with this incredible heat. Yeah. Not because sometimes they put the people in lockdown. If there's two people have a fight or something, then everybody goes on lockdown. They punish everybody in the whole unit until they get things figured out.
They shut the water.
Hmm?
So they shut the water for several days.
Yeah.
No water.
Yeah, sometimes the electricity goes out. They shut so they can't get water to people. Yeah, so give them baths, food, drink, clothing. Give them medical care. Yeah. Treat them like human beings. Don't treat them like animals. Yeah. I mean, I remember one time it's different seeing somebody in a cell than sometimes when they're escorting people from one place to another, they actually have cages out in the yard, and they'll put somebody in a cage. And that's just so horrible to see, Like I was walking along, probably going to the chapel area, and then there's somebody in a cage. And it's, it's awful. Okay, so don't have a mind that is filled with hate and revenge and wanting these people to suffer, but, keep them safe. Give them what they need to stay alive. And actually, it's wise to do that, because if the prisoners are well taken care of, then they get along better with each other. And then it's easier for the prison staff. So you would think that prison staff would do this, because it actually makes their life easier. But no, sometimes they do the opposite. And then, of course, you have multiple fights in the prison. You have knifings, either inmate on inmate or inmate upon guard. You have rape, again, either inmate on inmate or guard on inmate. So that actually just creates more problems for the staff. Yeah, and that's what is such a pity. But that they've cut prison budgets now, so that people don't have as many vocational activities. It used to be like in the 70s, there were more vocational classes, so people could learn a trade, so when they were released, they had a trade. It used to be that you could take college classes and even get a degree while you were in prison. Again, so when you were released, you would have some knowledge, you could get a job. Then you had all these budget cuts come along because, They just wanted to cut the budgets. And also, one of the most damaging things in our prison system is the governments of some states started privatizing the prisons. So you have for-profit prisons. Yeah, prisons that are owned by a corporation that people invest in, that pay the investors dividends. So what do you want to do in a for-profit prison? First of all, you want the judges to give people long sentences, and you want them to give many people sentences. Yeah, so there's a big chance for corruption there. Yeah. Plus, once you get the people in, so you're going to make a lot of money off of them because the state pays you according to the number of people you have in your prison, then you cut the programs. Then you make the food, you cut the budget for the food, because that way your investors have more profit. Yeah, so privatizing prisons is not a good idea. It is like open for abuse, and yet many states have done that. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I would think so. Yeah, I don't think it's right livelihood to make profit, earn your living by making profit from prisons. Yeah, I mean, I'm not talking about the guards here. They just have a job. But if you're trying to be an investor and encourage the judges to incarcerate more people, that's wrong livelihood. Yeah. Okay, so take good care of them. And if somebody says, well, isn't prison supposed to make such people suffer? What's the sense of keeping them incarcerated if they're comfortable? Okay, and so Nagarjuna responds that when parents discipline their children, they do so out of compassion, not because they want to harm the children. So in the same way, if you have to imprison people, do so out of compassion in order to help the person, not out of the wish to retaliate and inflict misery. Okay. Then 337, have I properly examined and identified particularly hateful murderers? You should send them into exile without killing or harming them. Okay, so there might be some people who are, they're murderers, they're maybe mentally ill, they're sociopaths, and even, they're very difficult to rehabilitate these people. They keep on acting out again and again and again because they haven't learned how to work with their anger and their rage. They can't adjust inside the prison. They're not going to adjust to society outside of prison. So if that is the case, then Nagarjuna says, banish them to another place. So that worked in ancient times when all the land wasn't owned by somebody or another, and where you didn't necessarily have clearly delineated borders between one empire and another. Now it's very difficult. You can't just send somebody to another country. Yeah. Yeah. But you can deport them before they commit a crime. Okay, so he's saying banish them to another place. And the reason he says that is nobody likes to be socially ostracized. So maybe by banishing them, they will come to examine their own actions and realize they have to change, and therefore when they're in the new place that they go to, they will act better. Yeah, so like I said, that may have worked in old times. It's not going to work now. Where do we banish them to? in now or in ancient China? Yeah. Yeah, they would brand you, and then everybody knew. Actually, in the Sangha in ancient China, if you had especially uncooperative Sangha members that you had to banish from the monastery, you would brand their robe, so that even if they went to another monastery, their robe would have a brand on them, letting the people in the other monastery know this guy's uncooperative, be careful. Yeah? Yeah. I mean, sometimes you get people in monasteries that, are just completely, out of control or whatever. Okay? So, without killing or harming them, banish them. Okay? Send them elsewhere if you can. Nowadays, difficult. So at least treat them kindly. Okay, then 338, independently survey all lands through the eyes of agents, always vigilant and mindful. Do what should be done in accord with the Dharma. Okay, so in ancient India, there was no system of mass communication. They didn't have fax machines or telegraphs or Instagram or tweets or anything like that. So it was hard for the king sometimes to know what was going on in different parts of the land. And it was important that he know. If people were unhappy and unsatisfied, he need to know. If there was an epidemic disease in one part of the land, the king needed to know. If there was a famine, he needed to know. If there was, threat of invasion from neighboring people, the king needed to know these things. So, in this verse, Nagarjuna is saying, you send out agents who are like the eyes of the king, to be in all the different parts of the kingdom, and then come back and report to the king how things are going. Okay? So it says agents. You could also look at this as spies in a way, because Nagarjuna says, don't let them know that the agents shouldn't let the populace know that they're reporting to the king. So in one way, if you have people working with bad motivation, if the king has bad motivation and the people who are being sent out have bad motivation, then they're definitely spies. And they're going to round up anybody who's threatening the king's rule. If the king has compassion and he picks agents that have compassion, then the agents are going to really look for, how are the people in these areas doing? Are they suffering? Do they need some kind of aid, special aid or not? And so if you have a good ruler and a good agent, then it's not spying at all. And then you could say, well, why not then tell the populace that the agents are reporting back to the king? Well, because, if they know they're reporting back to the king, what they tell the agent could be unbalanced in one way. Something or another could be exaggerated. Whereas if the populace doesn't know that these are agents being sent out, they can observe for themselves what's going on. Yeah. Kind of like when they were looking for the new Dalai Lama, they don't say we're looking for the new Dalai Lama, because that just would pollute the whole thing. Okay. Okay, so where it says independently survey all lands, it means that the agents voluntarily agree to go out and do this. You know, they're not forced to do it. Okay, so what attributes do you want in these agents? They should be vigilant. Yeah, they should be mindful. So they're people who are very perceptive, who can really pick up what's really going on in a place. Yeah, and people who do what should be done in accord with the Dharma. Yeah, so they're people with ethical standards, people with principles. Okay, and so having these kinds of people report back, then that enables the king to govern well. 339, through extensive and suitable generosity, respect and service, devote yourself always to those who are the foundation of good qualities. Do the same for the rest as is appropriate. Okay, so here the Sangha, meaning the monastic community, is what's considered the foundation of all good qualities, because they're the ones practicing and preserving the Dharma, passing it on to future generations. So it's appropriate to offer them the 4 requisites for life: food, clothing, medicine, and shelter, and to respect and serve them. And so as the leader of the country, you should do that, and you should encourage other people in the country to do that as well. And also, help other people who are honorable. So, you know, the other people in the country who keep good ethical standards, who are upright citizens, help them in whatever way you possibly can. Yeah. So, in other words, don't just look out for the rich and powerful, but respect everybody in the kingdom that is a law-abiding citizen who's doing their best to, be a good member of society. So this verse comes after the previous verse about sending out agents, because the agents will be able to see which Sangha communities are in need, which people in society are honorable, and so then he can report back to the king, who can then be exceptionally generous to, as needed and appropriate to these various people. Okay. Do you have questions so far? Yeah.
I do have a comment, though, is that my sense is that by using the Dharma as the criteria on his relationship to the subjects and for his ministers, the whole idea of having any type of inequality for the haves and have-nots seems to be dispensed with. By not using that criteria, then there's an equanimity. You're looking more toward virtuous actions and integrity rather than who's paying your bill and who's supporting you and who's, doing this and doing that. It just really levels the field so
Yeah.
you can support everybody.
Right. Yeah. If you have a government based on equanimity and on generosity, that's going to reach out and help people who are impoverished, then it's going to be a very different kind of place, isn't it? Yeah. If you realize that sometimes people are impoverished not because of their own doing, but because of circumstances that they encounter. So you have a social net, that can catch them and help them when needed.
And then you don't have a lot of incredibly angry, hopeless people.
Yeah.
But then you then have to do something else because they're desperate.
Yeah. 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 I mean, you can see that when people are impoverished, and when they don't have a good educational system in their neighborhood, when they don't have good activities for the children, then of course you're going to have more social problems. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
serve the people, not that the people are there to make him rich or give him presents or just be
Right.
servants. But it's actually important humility, responsibility,
Right.
and also the notion of caring for.
Yeah. Yeah. So he really emphasizes here that the king is, in one way, the servant of the people. And we actually talked about this a little bit earlier in the text, because in chapter 4 of Aryadeva's, the 400, he talks about this, how the ruler is only a ruler because other people have given them that power. And so as a ruler or as a leader, you should never be arrogant, because it's the people who put you in that position, and they have confidence in you, they have expectations, and you are in their servitude. You're not a leader in the sense of being able to command everybody to do what you want. You're a leader in the sense of serving the people that are giving you that position, because if the followers don't agree to make you a leader, you're not going to be one. Yeah. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Do you know if this text is available in China? Because some of these things that you describe, the stories of the great emperors, some of these actions are actually what they talk about, like sending out all these scouts and all that sort of
Uh-huh.
to survey the populace and all. And I find that a lot of similarity
Huh.
in what is this text available in Chinese?
This text, I think, yes, I think it was translated into Chinese. Yeah. And it would be interesting to see those kind of tales of the compassionate, merciful emperors, you know, who were clearly honored in Chinese society because they worked for the welfare of the populace. And they followed these things. Right. Yeah, it's very familiar here. Yeah. Yeah, I think this text was translated into Chinese. Yeah. Uh-huh.
These parts of the text remind me of phrase from Garland teacher. I don't remember, but it's like your mistakes are my mistakes. It's like, so this is the result, you know? This is just a result, so how you want to fix it.
Yeah.
So I think this is a very wisdom way for sure. So it's like
Yeah. Yeah, so this is kind of founded on the perspective of your mistakes or my mistakes. In other words, we're all in this together. And so let's help each other instead of take revenge. Yeah. Anybody else? Yeah.
And to share, when I started studying politics, I was actually looking for such kind of guidelines. Because I was searching everywhere, every professor who presented different books, different philosophers, and politicians who have been developing some kind of methods that could help society. And, you know, I felt like I have no ground on my feet because all of them are not referring to very old proven standards or something what could have some reason, some good results, or had some good results in the past, something,
Yeah.
you know, what gives hope.
Yes. Yeah. So kind of imagine teaching political science with these kinds of, you know, texts. That would be quite something. Yeah. Yeah. You had.
I was just thinking, you know, every time that healthcare education gets slashed, which it typically does, there's an uproar eventually, and you know, it gets sort of rebalanced again.
Yeah.
But in my memory in Canada, I don't ever recall anyone screaming about cutbacks for prisons, you know, and this is just so inhumane. You know, it's still this idea that they revile, but throw away the key. You know, we can't do anything about these people.
Mm-hmm.
They're subhuman. And it's just, you know, this kind of wisdom needs to get out there.
Yeah. Yeah. To have this kind of wisdom is good. I forwarded to all of you Obama's article about where he said that he's a feminist and talking about, equality for women, and, how, what a difference it makes when you have a leader who says such things. Yeah, I mean, it makes an effect on the entire country. I was reading this and thinking, I wonder what would happen if they translated it into Tibetan. Yeah, I wonder. Yeah, I mean, His Holiness would like it, but I wonder, what they've distributed this, what people would say. Yeah. Uh-huh.
In this country, and actually, I think in England in the past too, mental health institutes, people have been held in against their will, and have had very parallel histories to prison. In fact, in
Yeah.
Montana for a long time, they didn't have a prison for the women, so they were simply sent to Warm Springs, which is the mental health.
Yeah.
The mental hospital.
Right. So actually, up until Reagan, Reagan's administration, we had mental hospitals where people could be involuntarily committed and held against their will. Okay. Then Reagan closed those hospitals. All those people now live on the streets. Yeah, and don't get the kind of care that they need. And also there's been a series of laws passed whereby you cannot involuntarily keep somebody in a mental institution. And that, in one way, I mean, people say that's so good because then people can't be involuntarily held. But what it's also resulted in is people who are mentally unstable living in the family cannot do anything. If the person absolutely refuses to go, the family cannot force them to get the mental health care that they need. In this country. Would start a, if you, what are self for others? Endanger self for others.
That they can be committed and held and evaluated, for sure,
Yeah,
yeah.
if you endanger self for others, is that in all the states? If you endanger self and others? I mean, you mean that a family member could call and say you need to,
Yes, then
you can be held?
yeah, then mental health goes to the place or wherever it is, and they evaluate the person. If they deem that they're at danger to either commit suicide or violence on someone else,
Uh-huh.
then they call the police and write the affidavit. They take them,
Uh-huh.
lock them up. Then the next day.
But they lock them up in prison. No. They take them to the mental health. Okay.
Hospitals have involuntary units.
Okay.
They go there.
Uh-huh.
And then the next day or the day after, and like Harborview in Seattle, they have court right there in the hospital. The judge then listens to what that affidavit is, and then he will, she will say, yes, it sounds reasonable, and you're gonna go get evaluated 30, 60 days, and then, let us know what the outcome is. So
Uh-huh.
a person could be locked up for a long
Okay, so a person could. So I was wrong. So a person could be. Because the reason I said that was because I talked to some families who their kids were acting out and completely uncontrolled, and the parent could do nothing. The child had a mental illness, and the parent could do nothing to get them the treatment.
So if a person is psychotic, but
Mhm.
they are not deemed in danger of hurting themselves or others, you can't do anything.
Okay, so they could be psychotic, but if it's not in danger of helping yourself, hurting themselves or others, then you can't have them evaluated and put in them. Okay, so it has to be a really severe kind of situation. Yeah. So they can. So some family members can do something, but it has to be very severe.
And there are ways around it too. I just actually had somebody in my office who the child was out of control, running away, doing drugs, and I called and we got a bed, but they went and they just kept her overnight, but now she's also in an intensive outpatient.
Mm-hmm.
So she's getting the treatment she needs. The family needs help.
Okay. Okay, because I just talked to families where they were at their wits' end and didn't know what to do.
Because a lot of the violence that's been happening in America, like there have been people who've been known to be mentally unfit. They're going to the gun shops, the pawn shops, and going home and shooting their families. So either the families didn't know that they had some protective mechanism.
Yeah, or maybe they did, but the court said that, or maybe they didn't seem to endanger themselves or others, because also people can act one way with the family and put on a good face in front of the court, and then the court says there's nothing wrong, and then they go out and buy a gun and
Or they can get
Yeah.
worse and change, you know, it seems
Yeah.
like it's okay and there's no grounds to hold them, and then 2 days later, they, you know, there would be grounds, but by then they have a gun and they shoot someone.
yeah,
You know,
yeah. The guy at Sandy Hook was a good example of that.
and it's a fine line
Yeah.
because, you know, if you feel like you're pretty reasonable and yet somebody is saying that you're not and that we're gonna lock you up,
Mm-hmm.
anyway, that's not so good either.
No.
It's a very difficult
Yeah.
situation.
Yeah, for sure. It's, I mean, I'm not advocating going back to the old way. Yeah, but it's very difficult. And I think especially with guns available as easily as they are now. Mm-hmm.
Also, people that are convicted of a crime are sometimes sentenced to a mental facility rather than prison. I know someone who was.
Yeah,
And he was violent, threatening somebody with a gun.
yeah.
And they put him in one.
Oh yeah, in some prisons they have mental units, but also there's a number of people who are in general population who very clearly have mental problems and they are not getting the treatment they need in prison. Because prisons in one way have taken on the role of, before it used to be involuntary incarceration in a mental institution. Now somebody is doing something in society, they get arrested, thrown in prison, and they don't get the mental health care they need there.
And often it's because they needed mental health care, didn't get it, so then they start self-medicating with drugs. They get busted for that.
Uh-huh.
They get into the jail system and then they get lost.
Yeah. Yeah. We end on that note. Yeah. No, these situations are so difficult because you want to respect people's rights. You don't want to incarcerate people who are fine, with some trumped up cause. On the other hand, you want to make sure that people who need the help get the help they need before they harm themselves or others. Yeah. It is a very, very fine line.
Early treatment seems to increase the possibility of them getting better.
Yeah. Okay. So where are we? Let's see, where are we ending? Okay, so we'll start with 340 next time. Okay. But you can see, before we close, you can see how to be a king. If you have to appoint all these people and manage all these things and hear all these fine lines, and you have to be the one that determines this or that or the other thing, it's hard. It's, yeah. And even if you're stable in your own mind, you're going to make mistakes sometimes. Yeah? Because like we were just saying, somebody could look fine one day and then the next day just explode. And you don't know. And because if you lock them up on the day they look fine, that's not fair. So, difficult. Yeah?
Saying that when reading this chapter and also all the qualities the king is looking for in the people in his administration, helped me appreciate the first 3 chapters. Right, where Nagarjuna spent such a long time talking about the qualities the king has to develop himself, the wisdom, the truth, the generosity.
Yeah.
Like attracts like, right? If the king is not honest, he's not going to attract people. They're going to leave.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So why did this this chapter come where it does in the text? Because Nagarjuna has to explain 3 chapters beforehand how the king himself can become honest and upright and compassionate and ethical, and only then can he be able to, pick people in his administration who are likewise. Mm. Yeah. 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 Pardon? Uh-huh. Yeah, they're trying to do things. Yeah. Yeah, but, I don't know exactly, I don't know the specifics of Bhutan, but I know that they're trying to do things in a different way, and incorporate compassion and ethics, but not gender equality. Yeah, it's very interesting. Very interesting, so many texts, and in all religions, what do religions talk about? Equality, tolerance, peace, love, compassion, giving people a chance. And yet, it's very interesting. Sunday morning is the most segregated time in this country. Yeah, because people go to a church with people who look like them, more or less, And religion, of all societal social institutions, is the most conservative. It's so interesting because religious values are so liberal, but the institutions are so conservative. Yeah, more conservative than any other social institution in the society. Whether it, look at gender equality is good. We talk, equality somehow doesn't include women. Or it includes women when you talk, but there's all these things in the history of the religion that prevent you from acting out on it. Or something. It's very interesting. And the segregation, Sunday morning is so segregated in this country. And it should be the time where people are most integrated and reached out and expansive. It's very puzzling. But when you study history, religious institutions they often don't have a real good track record for helping the population, unfortunately. Okay, we better stop before I go on and on and on. This is what happens when you get somebody who's studied history.